In this video, we'll go over the latest research from ARK Invest. This is the Bitcoin monthly showing us exactly how Bitcoin has performed. We're going to look at crypto as well and how that's performing because something is happening right now. We can see Bitcoin outperforming massively. Bitcoin is really going from strength to strength. This is Bitcoin dominance. And so Bitcoin versus altcoins, and it is making or trying to make new highs for the year. Altcoins are getting crushed in Bitcoin terms. When is relief going to come for altcoins? We know Bitcoin is a leading indicator for those usually. So Bitcoin strength now. When is altcoin strength going to come? We'll look at that in this video. Timestamps I'll leave down below as well for you. First, we're going to look at the price performance of Bitcoin over September. Didn't really do much. It was more or less flat on the month. But what we can see here is what happens to Bitcoin during these phases, which is the bear market drawdown for the most part is over, in my opinion. It's been over for a long time. But what we're getting now is just the malaise or the sideways action before that real bull market. Now, we call it sideways action because, for Bitcoin going from 15 to 27 odd K, it's, let's call it 60% up this year. It was up 100%. Now it's, more or less 60%. That's a flat year for BTC. In fact, it's outperformed every other large-scale asset class. But what we can see here is the different phases of Bitcoin markets. So we have, the drawdowns here that we got in those times. But now what we're in, the blue, is that accumulation or recovery before a real bull market. The real bull market in Bitcoin price comes if and when huge stimulus is poured in from, the central bank. Now, is that going to come? If it does, Bitcoin will rise in price. We've seen that happen over cycles. If it doesn't come, Bitcoin is just going to go up at the rate at which the network is growing, and it's growing very fast. So it's up around 60% this year. It's a very good performance. And so when the real bull market comes, the currency debasement comes, Bitcoin will perform as well. But 60% in a year is very, very decent anyway. So what are we really worried about? Buyers are flocking into Bitcoin. Bitcoin is outperforming every other asset class, and I'll show you all of that data in this video right here. But also what it's trying to do is price in maybe just the next inflection of the economic cycle. So I posted this to the private Discord groups as part of the crypto investor course I think yesterday. What we can see here is this is M2 money supply growth, right? So all monetary aggregates growth in America. During the pandemic, a huge injection of capital. Now we actually have negative money supply growth, as you can see here, which hasn't happened to this extent before since 1960s. This is the worst possible environment for Bitcoin and especially altcoins, liquidity coming out of the system. What you have to do as an investor is think, what's the next part of the cycle? We don't even have to have a massive inflection to the upside. We just need a return to normality. And so that is usually how the cycle works. And so in 12 months time, things are going to be very different in my opinion. And Bitcoin is trying to price that in right now. If you want to get into the Discord groups, private Discord groups, and get all my research, just check the crypto investor course down in the description. You can see all of my research here. These are extra videos with some deep research on economic cycle, Bitcoin, altcoins, how everything's going as well. Private Discord groups as well, where I put in, just a lot more info onto this stuff. So check the link in the description if you're interested. This data is also fantastic to show us exactly where we are in the current Bitcoin cycle. So right now, long-term holders, so people that are genuinely confident in Bitcoin and want to invest in Bitcoin over the long term, they are dollar cost averaging, they are buying Bitcoin right here, and they are holding it. So this is long-term balances as a percentage of total supply. So that's people that are holding for at least 155 days. That's an all-time high since 2010, around 76%. So the cycle goes like this. When we have these huge inflections in the price of Bitcoin, long-term holders, of course, can be incentivized to sell via higher prices. And so if people want to buy Bitcoin, so there's significantly more demand than supply at that point, then the price has to move. It can work on the downside as well, of course. But as you can see during the downside, long-term holders, they actually go flat and then start rising again. So during the drawdowns, you can see long-term holders actually went up, right? So long-term holders buy dips and short-term or new entrants pay up to get that Bitcoin off of those holders. In the red right here, you can see all-time highs for Bitcoin and massive bull markets. That's when long-term holders actually come down. What's happening here is that new entrants are coming into the market and paying up and saying, I want your Bitcoin, and they're paying a price that incentivizes those long-term holders to sell. When you see that dipping, and I'll be here and I'll be showing you this data when that is dipping again in 25 or 6 or whatever, whenever it is, if you see this dipping down, that is the peak of a bull market once more. And that's probably an inflection high in the price of BTC. Now you can just hold your Bitcoin, you can sell some, that's up to the individual. We can see in blue right here as well, during bear markets or those recovery phases, long-term holder balance increases as people are taking their positions, looking forward, saying in 12 months time, we're going to be right into an area where Bitcoin has had its halving and it typically reaches all-time highs. So now is the time that real investors are doing the work. This report also touches on interest rates, which is of course on everybody's mind right now. What we can see is that, the market thought that interest rates were going to come down fast and come down low. And the black line here is that they've been repriced higher for longer, right? Now, this never ever happens like this. It's just that the market is kind of pricing that in right now. But what usually happens is the Fed raises rates, as you can see here. The black line is what they've actually done. They hold them there for a while. And then when the data gets weak enough, they just cut them immediately. That's what always happens. And so we would expect around a period of 3 to 8 months, usually around 6 months from the last hike, you get the pause. 6 months later, they start cutting. And so that's what it's going to look like, in my opinion. Same rates for a while and then down. Now that could be 3 months, it could be 6 months, could be 8 months. We don't know. And so there's a lot of pain, right? Rising interest rates could reduce market liquidity. And that means altcoins are going to suffer, right? You need lower rates, you need liquidity pumping into altcoins that are priced into the future for those prices to go up. But this is how it's going to look, in my opinion. You can see this always. This is the Fed funds rate. They rise and rise and rise. They pause, and then they start cutting. So that's what it looks like. It doesn't look like this. It's not going to look like this. But there could be another 6 months or more of high rates. We've seen, it's affecting things around the world right now. The dollar strength, high rates is not great for world growth. And so there's going to be a huge inflection, a point at some point. You're seeing Fed speakers come out and say, look, we think we're kind of done at this point, or maybe getting towards the end. And so rates high for a while longer probably, but there is going to be a cut and the market's going to price that in. And that's why Bitcoin is trying to price that in here as well. The report also touches on leading economic indicators as well, showing a huge drawdown. But what's the next phase, right? I think the best leading economic indicator in the world is Bitcoin, funnily enough. And I'll show you why. So leading economic indicators, usually when they show a huge drawdown, as you can see here, it is a recession that comes out officially in the data at some point later on. So we're there again. But the question is, what is the next inflection point? Is it to even worse data, right? That was the 2008 crash. Or are we actually going to just have that as the recession and then move up? I think a return to some sort of normality is more likely. The Fed already stepped in and bailed out the regional banks. And so this, in my opinion, is not going to happen. It's going to be a lot more difficult and maybe a longer period, because they're not going to flood the market with money like they did in 2020 because they're so scared of inflation now. But just going back to normality, I think would be good for BTC and altcoins, because the growth, they have higher growth. At least Bitcoin, you can see higher growth is going to outperform other assets. So in terms of leading economic indicators, this is the Bitcoin price after halvings. These are the cycles. We're looking at blue, which is the current halving. So what we can see is that around 300 to 500 days after the halving, which is this right here, that's where you get the all-time high. All right, so that's happened every other time. You can see it's not perfectly predictable. It's around 300 to 500 days. But after that, you get drawdowns. So we're in that period now. We had from the last cycle, 500 to around 950 days after the halving was the drawdown. It coincides with previous cycles, as you can see here. But then you have around 800 to 1100 days, you have that bottom, right? So the bottoming process, you test the lows a little bit. You have some false rallies and some dumps, but that's where you get that change in cycle. And then the Bitcoin price now, as you can see, is starting to just grind a little bit higher like it has done in previous cycles. So the two previous cycles up here, it had a little bit of softness and then started to grow again, a little bit of softness. That was the pandemic, so you can't really read too much into that. But what we're doing right now is exactly the same, which is We're not going to all-time highs now. We're not, breaking through resistance levels. We're in that recovery phase where we're just waiting to see where it will go. And then, as you can see, the Bitcoin halving, that's when you get the new inflection point. It's going to be the Bitcoin halving and also macro, but they are lined up, right? Think around 6 months' time. That's when usually you expect the Fed to start cutting and supporting the economy again. So the timing is right on here. Now, in terms of Bitcoin, it's the best performing large-scale asset class in the whole world this year. And so that's fantastic news, right? It's really great. Everyone in the crypto world should be on cloud 9. Now they're not, because altcoins are getting crushed, right? And we can see that here. Altcoins are getting crushed. Bitcoin dominance, as you can see, is just moving up. And a lot of people are invested in altcoins, and so they're getting crushed. Even if Bitcoin goes down, dominance is going up. So Bitcoin down, altcoins down more. It's just that part of the cycle. The liquidity isn't there, right? The money coming in isn't there. And so altcoins cannot outperform. It's just impossible for them to outperform in that environment. But maybe what you're waiting for is when the rates start coming down, interest rates start coming down, and also money starting to come back in. I don't know when that's going to happen. It could be 6, 12, 18 months around that time. Year-to-date returns, as you can see, Bitcoin outperforming everything else. I actually posted this back on the 6th of October on my Twitter. So if you're an investor and you're saving in Bitcoin, you're probably looking at other asset classes, right? So gold is actually down on the year according to this. So that's not good. S&P 500 is up around 10%. NASDAQ, huge outperformance this year, 35%. But Bitcoin around 60-65% up this year. If you want to see more of my research, I update it first in the Crypto Investor course groups for free. So you can have a look at that link down in the description. You can join the private Discord groups as well and talk about all of this with me. Links down below. I'm James, it's MoneyZG. Cheers for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.